And we are live. 7 p.m. Tuesday, October 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. Probably some of the most frequently asked questions we get are board maintenance. Just today, I think I had at least one, if not two people email and say, yeah, I just want to know, what do I need to do to keep my board beautiful and playing well as long as possible? They just want to know the basics of looking after it. And yeah, so the goal is here to answer as many of those questions as possible. This may end up being part 1 of 2 because what I share tonight may spark more questions. That's fine. I'll do another live in the future, answer even more questions. But for now, some of the things I'd like to cover for sure is storage. People say, where can I store my board? Then we're going to talk about just basic care of your board, as well as how to wax it, how often, what to use. And I'm going to share my experience. And yeah, hopefully that's helpful to you. And somebody asked me earlier when I was asking for questions on one of the socials, said, can you share a little bit about best flicking techniques? That's something maybe I'll touch on very briefly, but it's probably its own separate video because this, I want to cover the information in depth, but I also want to keep this as succinct as I can. Yeah, because just because succinct is good. Yeah. My assistant, my lovely and talented assistant, Elaine, is making faces at me like, am I talking with my eyes closed, honey? Is that the problem? All right, eyes open, mouth open, here we go. So, first question, storage. People want to know, where should I store my board? And I think that I'm a living example of that right now because the absolute best place to store your board is right out on the table so that it is in sight and in mind. I am blessed with a wife that allows me to have this set up in our living room. So our table is always out, and yeah, of course, because we sit down and play quite often. And I always give that answer, but I am being a bit of a smart aleck when I say it because I know that's not normal. So aside from that, I guess one thing I think is don't overthink it. Really, where does it work for you in your house to keep it? I know some people will keep their crokinole board under their sofa or behind their sofa. If you're going to keep it under your sofa, I don't really have a big issue with that, but I would encourage you to have it covered with something. We've had a lot of people lately ordering the carrying bag to go with their board, so that's obviously a great way to store it. Otherwise, even just having a piece of cardboard that you place over top of it, just keep it safe from the dust. And then the other question we get is if you are going to store it on edge behind a sofa or in the back of a closet somewhere, is it okay that it's not like perfectly straight up and down? And absolutely, like I wouldn't store my board on a 45-degree angle, but if you are, I mean, at a sensible angle, just enough to keep it so it can't fall over that way, I have absolutely no concerns of it warping because, I mean, it's not like you're going to leave it there for 30 years before you pull it out again. The other great thing is that with the base being made of particle board and the playing surface being made of MDF with the maple veneer, way less likely. Oh, we got Lindsay Fredericks tuning in. Your board is definitely probably ready for a wax because it's been probably 2 or 3 months and I know you've been playing it at least once a week. My guess, Lindsay, is you've been playing with the white and green buttons because, well, just because. And Dale Henry, how you doing, buddy? Nice to see you. Well, I guess I don't see you, but it's nice to know you're watching. And, yeah, anyway. Yeah, so as far as the storage goes, if it's in behind your sofa or in the back of your closet, as long as it's safe from getting hit and it's almost straight up and down, you shouldn't have any concerns at all. Yeah, the other big thing, like I wouldn't put it in front of a heat vent or even by a cold air return. And I wouldn't put it anywhere it's going to be exposed to fluctuations in temperature or huge fluctuations in humidity. Now, I mean, life is life, so I mean, you're going to have some of those fluctuations. I just, like I said, I wouldn't have it over a heat vent where it's going to heat up and expand and contract, expand and contract. You'd be asking for trouble that way. But if you just keep it in normal conditions, the board really should last a very, very long time. Oh yeah, the other question we get with storage is there's people that want to hang their board on the wall. Now there's a part of me that loves that idea because especially now with so many new people getting introduced to the game of crokinole, that if you're able to have it in sight and in mind, you're going to have a lot more. Every visitor comes over is going to go, what is that big round thing you got there? And it's going to get more people introduced. So I love it that way. The challenge is, how do we safely hang it on the wall? One, so that it's safe for your wall, and two, so that it's safe for your board. What we do occasionally is there's people that really, really want to hang it on the wall. So there's actually a hanging plate that we mount in the back side of the board before it ever leaves here, so you can hang it on the wall. The challenge I have with that is this board right here, our tour board, that's 20 pounds. That is 20 pounds. So when you put your screw in the wall, hello, Reed. Hey, you're on a Facebook Live, just so you know. Good. Cool. Yeah, that's 20 pounds hanging off of the screw. So two things. One, you better have a very solid screw, and two, you better get it rock solid into a stud, because there's nothing that would make me sadder than somebody emailing or calling to say that their board fell at 3 o'clock in the morning, broke the board, woke up the whole house. So some other alternatives is there's some great hanging units that you can put your board in. I get questions about those. There's some great units out there. I don't make them at this time. In the future, we may get into that, but right now, we are already significantly backordered on boards, and I'm just choosing to focus on making beautiful boards and getting those out there. And in the future, like I say, we may add those wall hangers. That's something you're interested in. I do know a guy that could probably make a couple, and or even just seeing a design if there's a woodworker close to you that would help you make something like that. I really encourage you to figure out something that's going to have more than a single screw in the wall that's holding your board up. Is there more questions popping up there, Elaine, that I should be aware of?
Lindsay's just loving your West Kings red board.
My West. All right, that's it. Go get me a black board right now. I wish I had a green one. All right. But yes, it is a lovely board. And maybe subconsciously I always wanted to be a West Kings Wolverine, although I don't think so. I think that's it for storage, unless there's any other questions popping up there. Now, the big question is, how do you wax your board? All right, let's start with how often do you wax your board? Now, I don't write in my journal every time I do it, so this is totally a guess. I'm guessing that sometime between every 4 to 8 weeks. And I know that's a big range, but approximately 4 to 8 weeks, I am going to reapply the wax to my board. And I know to do that when I notice that the board starts to slow down a little bit. Now keep in mind, our board is always out. It's always being, like I say, don't leave it exposed to the dust. But I mean, there's dust in the air. We are around it. We play on it a lot. You know, you get the oils from your hands on the buttons and then on the board. So I'm guessing that the average person doesn't need to do their board that often. It's something that you will learn over time, because the board slows down gradually as that wax starts to wear down. So you probably won't notice that it needed it until after you wax it. You go, wow, that's so much faster. But you'll learn over time. You'll know when your board has started to slow down a little bit. So yeah, when you notice it start to slow down, or if you just want to put a note in your calendar to do it every 2 months or whatever, but it's certainly not something you need to do every time you get your board out to play. Now, our favorite product. Before we get to our favorite product, I want to tell you a little bit about what we used to use. I actually dug it out because it's been away for a while. This is it's a carnauba wax, a tree wax. It's actually a paste, and there's a big old sponge in here. So what I used to do is I take a block of that paste wax, and I'd rub it all over the board, and then you buff it in, and then you'd want to wait 20, 25, 30 minutes, depending on the humidity that day, at which point you would want to buff it off with a clean cloth. The challenge I found with this, and I've had other people tell me they found the same challenge, is that it's a little bit finicky. If I was to wait too long or not long enough, it doesn't go well. It doesn't speed up my board. It would actually slow down my board. Same thing, if I was to overbuff or even worse, underbuff and leave too much of that wax behind, it just slows the board down. It's just not as much fun to play on. It's frustrating. So even though I did learn the knack of doing that, it's time consuming, especially because we wax every single board before it leaves here. So if you've just got your board and you're wondering, how soon do I need to wax it? Probably not for at least a couple of months. Just know that it did get a good application of wax before it leaves. So with the number of boards we're pumping out, this form of wax was slowing down our process, and I wasn't really enjoying it. So I did a lot of research, and I talked to some people that are way smarter than me, because I had people asking me, what can I use, and what about this product, what about that product, and I didn't feel comfortable endorsing or encouraging or recommending any product until I was comfortable using it, as well as I needed to know that it wasn't going to damage a board. So with a lot of research, I zeroed in on this, and I can put a picture to this later. I'll actually hold it up nice and close to the camera. And I've just been notified that the godfather of crokinole, John Conrad, has joined us, as well as Laura, I think.
That's Laura.
Awesome. Hi, Laura. Hi, John. I'm proud to say that at St. Jacob's Crokinole last night, I actually was successfully dropped more points, or gained more points than John Conrad, so that will go in my journal. Anyway, yeah, so after a lot of research, this has the carnauba wax in it, as well as orange oil, and I did enough research that I felt very confident that this was not something that was going to damage the board. And I used this product on my own board, just on my personal boards. I continued using this stuff, even though it's a little frustrating, until I had put this on my own boards for long enough that I felt super comfortable using it. And this product, you can get it at Amazon, you can get it here in Canada, Home Hardware, Canadian Tire. I think, I buy these in bulk, but I think even if you're buying single bottles, you're probably 12, 14 bucks for this spray bottle. And I'm guessing, again, I don't track it, I'm guessing you could probably do your board 40 or 50 times with this. Yeah. And so one of the most recent emails I got when they're asking me about this, they went, I just don't want to, I don't want to do it wrong. I don't want to do the application of the wax wrong. And I totally get that. I understand that you want to look after your board. One of the reasons I love this is because it is basically idiot proof. I don't think it gets much simpler than this. So right here live, I'm going to show you exactly how it's done. But you take notes, watch careful, all right? So I got my trigger on, it's ready to go. And I give this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squirts. So basically I hit each quadrant and then I hit the center. And then what I do is I grab a cloth, and all I have is rags. It's old t-shirt material. So that's what I'll start with, and immediately, or I'm not worried that this sat here for a few seconds, but you can just immediately start buffing that off. So you're just going all around the board, getting that wax right back off there, or getting the moisture of it right back off of there. Now, I get the advantage because I will actually wax all the boards before the pegs ever go in, which makes this way easier. Now, speaking of which, I've had people say, should you take the pegs out to wax the board? My advice would be absolutely not. Is it a little bit easier without the pegs in the way? Yes, but the risk is not worth the reward. I never ever take pegs out unless there's a darn good reason to. And I have a jig. It's a piece of wood. I call it my pizza board. It's a round board because it's got holes in there, small, like 1/2 inch or a little bit smaller holes, that I set in place, so when these screws are going in, if my drill slips or my screwdriver slips, I'm not dinging that surface, because I don't know about you, but it would make me cry. So maybe not on a live, so everybody's watching, but so yeah, I just wouldn't recommend pulling those pegs out. Just work around them. So yeah, I took that one cloth, and if you're only doing one board, you probably get away with one cloth. I like using a couple cloths. And this one, these are both all cotton, but this one has a little more like a thicker weave to it, and I just find this super effective. And what you'll do is you'll start buffing here, and you almost feel it break free. So this is just super, super slick. And my experience of using this on a brand new board or on a board that's older and started to slow down is that, yeah, I didn't time that. I'm guessing even with talking through it, it took me maybe 2-3 minutes to do that. And I just went around here just to wipe the gutter out because I want to play right away. You don't need to wait. You can do this and play instantly. So there it is. That's how I wax it. Back to the carnauba wax for a minute. As much as I kind of didn't really speak super highly of it, it does have its place. If I had an older board that had some checking in it and maybe some blemishes, I know I talked to a guy, my buddy Nick here a few months ago, and he had, I can't remember what happened, but there was something had hit his board and done a bit of damage to the playing surface. And I actually said, why don't you try the carnauba, because the carnauba the paste wax can kind of make some of that stuff disappear a little bit. So it does still have its application, but for most people, and 99 times out of 100 now, it's the spray wax that I want to use. It's quick, it's easy, it's simple, and that is good to go for probably another 6 weeks before I even have to give it a thought. checking my notes here. Oh yeah, before I move on to the actual playing wax, a question we get a lot, and feel free to disagree with me here, but people will ask the questions about having food or drink around the board. And I have heard people say, absolutely not. You can't have any food or drink around the board because the crumbs get on the board and they slow it down. Even your drink, like if your glass is sweating or you get a little bit of pop or beer or whatever beverage you're enjoying on your hand and then on the buttons and then you play, it's going to slow the board down. I can't disagree with that. It may be true, but my experience or my personal opinion is that in our house, the Crokinole Board is a very social place. Saturday afternoon, my buddy Roy comes over, me and him and Reed will sit around and play some Crokinole. If we happen to be having a snack at the time, or drinking a coffee, or having a beer, I'm not going to tell anybody not to have that beside my board. And I accept that if there's food and drink around my board, I may need to reapply the wax a little more often because it might have a tendency to slow my board down. But to me, it is 100% worth it because I want this to be a social place that, yeah, you just enjoy your time around it. Now that said, if you set your beer on my board or you chew your chips or any other food and your crumbs are falling on my board, that's a different conversation altogether. I'm not going to like you very much at that point, but I absolutely do want you to enjoy whatever you're enjoying around the board. So, and I know some guys down in Voorheesville, if you try to make a no board here around the board rule, they probably give up the game completely. So, yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you don't want it spraying and going all over the board, but by all means, just eat and drink responsibly. That's all I'm trying to say. All right, so I think that's all my points there. Now we're going to move on to the playing wax. And I did do an actual YouTube video, it's probably one of the first videos we did, like a year and a half ago, one of the first YouTube videos we did. Because there seems to be a school of thinking that people, they want to take and they want to sprinkle the entire board, just like with a salt shaker, and put it all over the board. One, it uses a lot of wax, and two, I find that if you are to do that, what ends up happening is you get to a point where your buttons start to snowplow because of the big piles. It's really, really difficult to keep the board consistent because you're going to have different amounts of wax in different places. And if you're playing and you notice there's a whole bunch of wax here, but not very much there, how do you go about evening that out? It's almost impossible. Where that would come in handy is if you had a really old, crappy, cheap board that just no matter what you did, you couldn't speed it up. Putting wax everywhere might be your friend. But if you got a decent board, this is what I'd encourage you to do. And it really doesn't take that much. You put a little bit in front of each player. I'm probably a little more liberal and generous with it than maybe some people are. I probably shouldn't have said liberal this close to the election. Anyway, I'm probably a little more generous with the wax. But then all you have to do is you take your button and you just gently rub it into that wax so you get a little bit on the underside. Now the pressure's on. Wow, is the pressure on? Woo! 20. Hope you're watching, John Conrad. There's more of that coming your way 2 weeks from now in St. Jacobs. But yeah, that's all you need to do is each time before you shoot, you're just rubbing a little bit on there. Take an aim. Uh-oh. 50% success rate so far. The other question that I've seen come up a few times online lately is people say, well, what do you do with your wax after you're done playing? If you're moving your board somewhere, you got this wax here, do you scoop it onto your paper and then put it back in the shaker? And I've seen the question a few times and I've stayed out of the discussion completely because I just figured maybe other people had better input than I did. I don't worry about it. I guess we have so much wax around, I don't even give it a thought. And I feel like it just goes so far that I don't give it a lot of thought. The only time I give the wax a thought is if I'm moving a lot of boards around that we've used at tournaments that have wax in the gutter, and Elaine hollers at me because there's wax everywhere. Otherwise, I don't. She's trying to pretend like she hollers a little bit. But yeah, otherwise.
You don't store your board, so you don't have the issue.
Well, yeah, I don't store my board, so I don't have the issue as often. And some people are saying, yeah, they sweep it onto a piece of paper and then pour it back in. And somebody else said, well, when you do that, you're getting a bit of dust and dirt over time. And yeah, I guess just figure out what makes sense for you. The one thing I'll say, and I mentioned it in a live. I guess I'm not as organized as I thought because, oh, here it is. Something that I think you will find will allow you to not use as much while you're playing is to have a little paintbrush around. So sometimes you start it and you put a little bit here, and the next thing you know, you feel like there's no wax. It's like, where did all the wax go? But if you just take your paintbrush and pull it back in from both sides, look at that, all of a sudden I've got ample wax all over again. So something like that can just help you make the most of the wax you do put in the gutter. So maybe you don't need to put quite as much in there each time you play. Is there any other questions popping up over there? And no smart aleck comments.
Joshua Malloy says he spilt a whole glass of wine on his table and wiped it up, and he has had no issues with it. So
okay.
It's wine-proof.
It's wine-proof. All right. I'm a little surprised that a guy who runs the Extra Pint Crokinole Club in Texas was drinking wine, but we're not here to judge. So you do you, Joshua. That's awesome. Yeah. I think that's it for that. I am going to spend, I don't even know how long we've been going here.
20 minutes.
20 minutes? All right. I'll spend a few minutes on, a couple minutes on flicking technique, and then maybe when I put this up on YouTube, I'll split it into 2 videos. So I get interesting questions of people will say, which finger should I shoot with? And to me, when I hear that, that's almost like saying, which hand should I shoot with? Because some players play right-handed and some players play left-handed. So my answer would be whichever one feels better to you. Like, it's like when you give a kid a baseball bat and you just see which way they want to swing it. Like, what is their more natural way of doing it? So when you play something down and you want to give it a flick, what just comes more naturally to you? That's probably your best way to go. Now, there are some exceptions. I don't have stats on this, but just going to the NCAA tournaments, I would say that probably at least 80, if not 90% of the players shoot with their index finger. And I've heard a few people share this, that apparently Justin Slater, who I believe has won the World Championships in Tavistock more times than any other player. I think he's up to 5 now. No question, a fantastic player. Apparently, he won the Worlds for the first time, and correct me if I'm wrong, just a few months after switching from being a second finger shooter, middle finger shooter, over to index. And I know his dad, Fred, probably just a couple months ago, switched over to index. My hat's off to that, because that would be tough to do. I have always been a second finger shooter. That's just what feels good to me. Yeah, I just like it. When I try to switch to my index finger, I find that I hit this peg every stinking time. I'm just like that 10 degrees off of straight. I don't know why, but my index finger is just not my friend for shooting. So, but that said, the one downside of being a second finger shooter is that when I set up like this and I look down, I've got a finger in my way. So it blocks my view, because something that gets me in trouble sometimes, and maybe you don't care about this, you're just sitting around the table drinking wine or beer or whatever, playing with your buddies, but for me playing competitive, there are times when I go to shoot, and right at the last second, my disc will just shift on me a little bit, and it messes up my shot. And sometimes I wonder, without my index finger in the way, if I might spot that a little more easily. Now, that said, it hasn't frustrated me enough to make the switch, but it is something to consider. I did a whole video a few months ago as well on how to shoot without hurting your finger, because so many people, when I read articles and stuff online, they'll say, oh yeah, my index finger still hurts, or my fingernail still hurts whenever I think of playing that with Granny and Grampy. All you need to do is hold your shooting finger, whichever one you're shooting with, a little bit closer to the button, so it becomes more of a push. I mean, we go and literally play crokinole all day long. I don't get up and have to ice my finger the next morning. Like, there's no discomfort, because it's more of a pushing action than a hitting action. Whereas if you're further away, so your finger picks up momentum before it hits, then it's not going to feel as good. While we're talking about shooting fingers, actually, probably 3 weeks ago now, I was in Budapest, and I've seen people do this occasionally before, but there was a player we played against there who every single shot he shot with his thumb. Now, I'm not recommending this. I'm just saying it is legal within the rules of the game, and he just, I don't even know how you eye that up. But yeah, it's whichever one feels good to you. Now, as far as the actual shooting technique goes, excuse me, I personally, I like having my middle finger, my shooting finger, goes against my thumb, and that's kind of where I can build up the pressure, and it helps me control, because shooting for an open 20 is a lot different pressure than going for a takeout or going for a follow-through 20 or something like that. But there are plenty of players, and very, very good players, that shoot what is called free finger. So they don't use their thumb at all. And I remember the one player explained to me that he did that because he found that sometimes he was misfiring. His finger would slip off of his thumb prematurely, and it was messing up his shot. I've never noticed that enough to inspire me to try to switch to free finger. But yeah, a lot of great players do it with their index finger or their middle finger, where it's just a free-fingered shot, and it doesn't work for me, but it may be worth you trying to see how you feel about it. The other one that I've seen, and I think Connor Ryman, who did extremely well this past weekend's tournament, he shoots with his index finger, but he uses the edge of the board instead of his thumb. So his finger is against the edge of the board, and then, oh, maybe I should switch to that. That was my index finger too. But that's how he shoots, and that's what he finds. That's what he finds works for him. Now, maybe you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and that's why I just stick with my middle finger. But the other thing I remember seeing, and it was a slight variation of that, it was a few years ago at the Worlds, and there's a young guy from somewhere in the U.S., and he would shoot free finger, but he held on to the rail. He stabilized his hand with the rail in order to shoot. And my experience of just playing one game against him was he was really good here, but as soon as he got forced off to the side, either side, by holding the rail, I don't really think it served him all that well. That could have just been in that game, but those are all variations of how you can shoot, and it's just, I don't really think there's a right way or a wrong way. It's just zeroing in on what works for you. Now, that said, there was, it was just probably a month ago, maybe a little more, I was at a club, and there was another guy from the U.S. who was up here visiting. And what I noticed he did, he shot free finger, but his hand was floating. So, excuse me again. He didn't brace his hand before he shot, so his hand was floating. And it seemed to work for him because he's a great little player, made some great shots. But to me, I feel you are best served to have your hand on that rail so that your hand is solid, everything is still, so you're removing as many of the variables as possible, because if your hand can float, you got some variables, but if everything's planted, using the thumb, 20. Obviously it works because I just dropped 20 off it. But yeah, I just feel if you're bracing and holding everything still, and then, yeah. Got ran out of things to say. Is there anything else popping up there? Or?
No. Nick joined you.
Nick.
Jim Pinkney.
Pinkney. Yes, Pinkney. Right. Yeah. So those are my thoughts on shooting technique. I hope that helps. And yeah, I guess the only thing I mentioned, there's some people that shoot free finger. There are some people that will shoot free finger for an open 20 or a light shot, and then they switch to using their thumb for more power if the shot requires more power. I also know people that will shoot with their index finger, except when the shot needs power, then they go to their middle finger. I don't know why, but yeah, just play with it. And I guess my encouragement would be to just pick a finger and stick with it, at least for a time. Because yeah, if I was constantly switching back and forth, I would find it very difficult to see progress and move forward and know what was working and what wasn't, because there's just too many variables. So
Nick commented that he has switched between 6 and 8 different flicking styles before he finally settled in on one that worked for him.
Okay. Yep. I don't know how quick he can type it, but can he give a quick explanation of what he settled into?
I don't know.
Well, I know. I'm looking at you, but I'm talking to him. Nick, you know who I'm talking to. Yeah, so I assume you can hear what Elaine was saying there through the camera. But yeah, Nick is sharing that he went through 6 or 8 different flicking styles before he zeroed in. My other question to Nick would be, the style that you settled in on, is that the one you're going to beat me with? That's the question. And when are we going to get a chance to find out? That's the better question, because we will have a chance to not have a no beer around the table rule while we have our game, Mr. Nick. Yeah. Aside from that, unless we give people like a little bit of time while I wrap up here, if there are any questions, yeah, fire them in there and I'll answer them real quick. But at this point, I kind of feel like I've covered what I wanted to cover. And if you watch this video later, because it will be on Facebook, obviously, and I will get it posted to YouTube, if there's something that I didn't cover well enough or at all that you'd like me to cover, throw it in the comments and it could be part of a future live. And you look like you have something. Is there something? Oh, okay. I thought you looked like you were reading something over there. So, Scott. All right. I can't think of anything funny to say about the Montreal Canadiens. So, for now, I'm going to shut down the live and hopefully challenge young Reed to a game of Crokinole. Thanks for tuning in. Hope that helps you maintain your board, enjoy your board, and continue to have fun playing the greatest game on earth. You want to hit the end live button there for me?